You're listening to the School of Connection podcast, episode 16.
Welcome to the School of Connection podcast with Rana Ulk. Each week, she'll connect you with the stories and wisdom of people doing extraordinary work that's changing the world. If you're hungry for growth and love inspiration, you're in the right place. Each episode will give you practical insights and ideas that you can take action on starting today. And now, your host, founder and chief connectologist, Rana Ulk.
Hello, everyone. How are you all? Guess what? I don't have a guest today. That's right. I'm the only person you're going to be hearing from, and it's the first time I'm doing it this way. We're 15 episodes in, and it's the week after Thanksgiving, so everyone is kind of slowing down on their commitments, and rather than be concerned about lining up guests over the holidays, I realized that I wanted to share an important experience with you that I think you all would be able to relate to. Before I get into that story, let me explain a bit more. I've been thinking that it's time for me to come out of hiding a bit. Sure, there are a lot of podcasts out there that are all about the guests, and always all about the guests. I listen to quite a few of them. I love them. I love listening to interviews, and I love the variety. But then there are a couple of podcasts that I adore where it's just the host, one person talking about something that matters, that hopefully inspires or provokes some sort of change in the listener. I've admired people who can do that. It's not easy to consistently come up with interesting things to say, let alone say them in a way that engages the interest of thousands or, even millions of people. And even if you did know how to be endlessly inspiring or entertaining, I think it's still brave to podcast yourself talking. You know why? Because think about it. It's the strangest thing. I'm sitting here, I'm talking into a microphone, and there is no one here. I'm alone. I'm talking and I'm receiving exactly zero feedback. And I gotta admit, it feels kind of silly. I'm pretending to talk to you and you're not even live. It's not like you're out there and this is being broadcast live and I can think, okay, someone out there is listening right now. No, by the time you listen to me talking directly to you, as I am right now, it's just a recording that took place who knows how long ago. So that's it. It's silly and it's strange, but so many people do it. And I suppose you get used to it. You get used to talking to yourself. I'd like to get used to it. And the only way is for me to continue doing it, right? So here we are. So what would I talk about? Naturally, something that matters to me. Over the course of the 15 episodes I've had, I've always wanted to highlight what was most important to my guests, what they were working towards, what mattered most to their hearts, what they wished for, what touched them, what difference they wanted to make in the world. And so that's what I'm going to do. What matters most to me, I've come to realize, is, in case you hadn't noticed from the title of this podcast, connection. Everything I do, that I am, that I yearn for, that I'm curious about, and even what I struggle with or am pained by, is ultimately related to connection or lack thereof. Now, I know that could mean different things to different people. It actually also can mean different things to the same person at different times, different situations, or different places. I mean, that's just the truth. So it seems to me that it would take me a whole book to explain what I mean when I say connection is what matters most to me. And hey, maybe I will write a book someday, but right now I'm focusing on this. I could talk about connection in many different ways over several episodes too. I just don't know how to do it in one episode. What I do know is that I can give some examples of how connection is everywhere in our lives, and not just mine, but yours too. So that's why I'm going to tell you a little story back to that point now, the story that is about what happened at my house over Thanksgiving. It was just last week. And I know that you could be listening to this, I don't know, 6 months from Thanksgiving, but just think about any kind of family gathering that you have. As we know, family gatherings, they are joyful, but they can also include some pain or discomfort or annoyance or irritation. Families are complicated. No one's family is perfect. And I'm actually grateful that I have some pretty awesome family gatherings, I have to say, even if many of my close family members are more often than I'd like missing because we're kind of scattered all over the world. In any case, this particular Thanksgiving, my mother and father-in-law were in my home. They were staying here, and so was my mom. The Hubs and I, we just moved to California last month, and so we were very eager to fill the 2 guest rooms we have in our house. It's the first time we've had 2 guest rooms. So before you think I'm going to tell you a tale of woe of how my in-laws were here, and oh gosh, that's so awful, I'll just say, too, that I adore my in-laws, all of them. The husband, his package, the way he came was with both parents, his 5 siblings and their spouses and their children. And I adore all of them. I think that's pretty rare. So having said that, though, you would agree that you can adore someone and still be irritated as hell with them, right? So that's what my story is about. Thanksgiving Day, there was tension between my mother-in-law and me. And I ended up feeling very, very anxious and uncomfortable and worried. There is a thread of connection all over the story that I'm going to tell you, but let's start with this first. The anxiety, the tension, the discomfort, all of these feelings mean that I was somehow disconnected, because when we're connected, we're whole, we have perfect bridge between ourselves and others, and there's no reason for really discomfort in a relationship. So anxiety, tension, these are signs of some sort of disconnection. I'm anxious and tense in the situation, so I'm disconnected from the experience, the moment, and the enjoyment of all of us being together. I was feeling disconnected from my mother-in-law and disconnected from my husband as well. I don't know about you, but when I'm anxious or tense, I am not my best self. I'm not very pleasant. I'm guessing that is true for you too, unless you are superhuman. I've lived with my husband for 15 years, and he knows very well when I'm not being my best self. So he knew that I was anxious. He wasn't very eager to be pleasant either. And you know, those kinds of feelings can be contagious sometimes. Anyways, ultimately I was disconnected from the truth of what was happening. And when I look back, I could have changed the situation. I could have reconnected, but I didn't. The cause of the tension was my mother-in-law, I'll put this in quotes, interfering with, quote, everything I was doing. I wasn't cleaning my kitchen the way that she would. I was doing things my way. And, you know, she's in her 80s. And in my ideal world, we don't let our elders do any work. If they offer help, I'm supposed to decline. That's how I was raised, okay? I cannot sit or not do enough or not do things while my 80-something-year-old mother-in-law is on her feet. Like she just has to sit. And she wasn't. She was refusing to, which was really irritating me and causing me to say, oh my gosh, what I'm doing isn't good enough for her, and that's why she's interfering. That was the story that I was creating in my head. Remember, this is my world, okay? I am not, nothing that you know, I'm saying is an accusation or saying that she was or wasn't doing something. This is my head, my story. Her truth was that she really did want to help. She wasn't asking that I do things her way. She wasn't criticizing what I was doing. When she's saying, well, why are you putting the green beans in the oven? Oh, this is how I do them. Why aren't you doing them like that? That's not her criticizing. She's very active and she's lively, and she wanted to participate and be included and didn't feel right with me doing all the work. She doesn't care that she's 80-something years old, and her, you know, she doesn't want to sit there and watch me doing all the work. So my anxiety kept climbing. And once I was anxious, I was no longer thinking rationally or being my best self. It's no excuse, but at one point, she suggested to me that I buy a certain product for my kitchen that she really believes in. And I snottily said I wasn't interested. And this is like an hour or two into all the prep work. And so I was already anxious. So I wasn't interested in this product that she was recommending, but I wasn't nice about it. And what she doesn't know is that she had mentioned this product to me several times in the past and, quote, suggested it to me. So I felt like she was being pushy at this point by mentioning it again, especially after I had just, kind of freaked out about the way she was cleaning my kitchen. I have a particular way. I can be very controlling, and I wanted her to not clean it. I wanted to clean it my way, and she wouldn't let me, and so I was irritated. So she asked me why I wasn't interested in this particular product, and I didn't want to explain myself because at the moment I felt like it was me having to defend myself rather than answer her curiosity. I know that someone out there listening right now knows or can picture this situation, right? Somebody's asking you a question, and in hindsight, you realize that maybe they were just being curious, but you feel defensive about it. So this is the kind of trick our brains and our emotions can play on us when we're already feeling anxious or self-conscious or just like something's not right. So she insisted that I explain why I wasn't interested in this product, saying, listen to me, this is conflict. I want to talk about this. She literally said those words. And instead of taking the opportunity to take a deep breath and stop and say, okay, you know what? You're right. I'm feeling conflict. Let me gather my wits and let's talk about this. I just was still anxious and I gave her a rushed response about why I wasn't really interested in this product and I wanted to close the subject and it was done. Now, I've already made a long story out of this, my personal experience. So I'm not going to go into all the other details of the little things for several hours that day that happened, the molehills that I made into mountains. Suffice it to say, I was making stories up about what my mother-in-law was thinking. I had her all figured out, right? She was thinking that, boy, Rana's so controlling, which, like I said, I kind of am. I can't believe she freaked out over, the turkey juice that I was cleaning, and I can't believe that she criticized the way I was cleaning. Gosh, Rana's leaving me out. It's no fun being in her house. I'm never coming for Thanksgiving to her house again. And, all these things, all these thoughts that I was putting in her head. And I was, having these images of her telling our other family members that she's never coming to our house again. Really ridiculous stuff. So I'm I'm embarrassed to say these things out loud, but I'm telling you because I want you to know that when you have moments like this, when you're thinking crazy thoughts or having arguments in your head with other people, when you're making up stories about what others are thinking, and you probably don't realize it at the time that you're making up stories, but you're reacting to these stories as if they're true, as if you know, and you really have no proof. Well, all of these things that we do and that you do, that I just did, that I just explained I did, you are not alone. None of us are all alone. We all do this. We just don't talk about it very openly. So when things calm down or you calm down or you sleep on it, you think, oh my God, what the heck is wrong with me? So that's what I did. I mean, I couldn't seem to stop the downward spiral of anxiety and thoughts that I was in. And so I kept busy all day, putting Thanksgiving dinner on the table. I wanted it to be perfect and wonderful. And truthfully, by the time I sat down, I wasn't having fun anymore. I was so anxious and tense and worried about these thoughts that my mother-in-law was, quote, having about me that I really just didn't have the best time I could have. I wasn't enjoying it. So of course, the next day, I'm thinking, gosh, I created my own suffering. And that's what we often do. We create our own suffering in our heads. Now, that's not to say, that I thought that she was perfect. I was still questioning why she had interfered. I still thought to myself, well, why couldn't she have just sat down and relaxed and not asked why I was doing things the way I was doing them? I don't go to her house, and when she's cooking, I don't tell her how to do things my way. And, why did I have to explain that I like to clean my kitchen a certain way? If somebody told me to drop the rag and that they were going to do it, I'd be like, okay, sure, no problem. But guess what? I could have stayed with all these assumptions about her. I could have continued having these thoughts. I didn't want to. I didn't want to continue thinking that she was unsatisfied with what I was doing, that she had a terrible time, and I didn't want to go through another whole day with her with that tension. So I knew I had to talk to her. I knew that it was the only way, and that the worst thing that could happen is that the conversation could go very badly and I'd still have tension with her all day. But, I was going to have tension, feel that tension anyways. But on the other hand, the best thing that could happen is that I could resolve the tension, dissolve it, and we could have a really good, happy Friday. That's what I chose. And that's my point. The price of connection, you guys, this boils down to connection. The price of connection, of intimacy, of being known, of love, of being accepted, thorns and all, is facing rather than turning away from difficult conversations. Connection requires difficult conversations. Not all the time, sometimes. If you are in a relationship with someone long enough and you actually care about them, there is no way you are ever going to be able to avoid making the choice of either to confront conflict or walk away from it. Connection requires honesty. It requires vulnerability. It requires an ability to admit your crazy parts. It requires saying, I'm sorry, or I'm mad at you, or I don't agree with you, or even, I hate you right now, or I hate what you did. Too many of us run from these conversations. I know I have in the past. I'm not always perfect. I don't always face conflicts. And we run away for so many reasons. It's hard to tell someone, you know what, I see you doing this and I think you're wrong. It's hard to do it partly. I know for me, I know that I've been very judgmental. I can be judgmental. And so when I call someone's behavior out, I'm afraid that I'm going to be labeled and that, tag of judgmental is going to be placed on me. But sometimes we need to judge a behavior. Sometimes we need to call people out. And we confuse calling a behavior out with being judgmental. It's equally, if not harder, to admit that you might be the one that was wrong, but you won't find out unless you have that conversation with someone. And maybe you'll wake up to a part of yourself, to some wrong that you're creating, that you'll be grateful for. You'll be grateful that someone called you out. I know I am. It's hard to look someone in the eye and say, there's tension between us and I don't like it. And here's where I see that there was tension. Here's what was going through my mind. I know this isn't rational, but it's what I was feeling. It's not easy to do that. When I did it on Friday morning after Thanksgiving, when I walked into my mother-in-law's room and I said, we need to talk. There's tension between us. My heart was beating. I was dreading. I was trying to rehearse it in my head for an hour beforehand. Wasn't doing a very good job because I was very anxious. I wish I could have put it off. I did wish that I could have put it off. But I knew that if I didn't talk to her, if I didn't face this, it would be one of those sore spots between us. It might make me pull away from her. It might make me anxious the next time she comes to my house. I would remember what happened this time, and I'd already be anxious. And like I said, when we're anxious, we are not our best selves. It's impossible. This is what creates disconnection oftentimes in our relationships. Too many unspoken conflicts, resentments. This is what creates distance. This is what creates disconnection. Having the difficult conversation with someone we care about is so much easier than living with the pain of being misunderstood, of repeating instances of tension. Having a difficult conversation is so much easier than misunderstanding someone else, of missing out on their truth. It's so much easier to have a difficult conversation than it is to miss out on saying, I love you, and I hope you love me too, even though I'm flawed and imperfect. Because it's only when we can say that we love someone, and when we can say and admit that we want to be loved too, that's true connection. I know that this won't be my last conflict with my mother-in-law. I know it won't, because we're close. It's precisely because we're close that we even have the opportunity to have conflict. But I love now that we did have that tension and conflict, because I know her so much better and I love her so much more after that conversation. She was just trying to help. She wasn't interfering. She was saying what was on her mind, and whatever anxiety I felt about what was going on that day was all my own. And I'm sure she was annoyed with me too. I was being annoying. But what I want you all to take away from this, my friends, speaking of connection, is just this: honesty, truth, vulnerability, communication. These are what create and deepen our connections. You cannot have any of these things and not encounter some conflict. You cannot be honest and truthful and vulnerable and not have conflict. It's not whether you have conflict, but how you deal with conflict when it arises. And if you're close enough to someone or know them long enough, it inevitably will arise. Conflict will arise. It's not whether, it's how you deal with it that determines the quality, the depth, and the satisfaction that you're going to get out of your relationships and your connections. That's it, above everything else. I stand for connection. I want more of it in my life. I want true connections. I want to know someone, and I really do want to be known. I want to be accepted. I don't ever want to feel alone because I don't feel known. But if I do feel that, I know that it's always because I'm hiding. We all want to be known, actually. Being human, it's wired into us that we yearn to be seen and heard. We want to be acknowledged and validated. We can't live without these things, yet so many of us today are afraid. We're afraid more than ever. We're surrounded and bombarded with everyone's highlights, and the more we see others seemingly living perfect lives or being perfect, the more alone we feel in our own imperfections, in our lowlights. So we hide. We live in an age when people seem to be more defensive, so it's hard to confront people. We're all afraid of not being liked, of being rejected. And when you confront somebody with a wrong or with a hurt, there's a possibility that they will say, you know what, I don't like what you're saying, and walk away, that they'll reject you. Well, so be it. I stand for connection and for having only authentic relationships in my life. I don't always succeed in that. I sure do try. I don't want to be a part of what we're seeing these days, which is epidemic levels of loneliness and disconnection. It's having devastating consequences in our society. And that's a whole other episode, or episodes with other guests. We will be talking about these things in this podcast. But for now, this is it, my friends. That's all. Think about your relationships. Think about how you confront conflict. Do you sweep things under the rug? Do you judge people? Do you think that they're bad when there's conflict? Do you judge them instead of the behavior? Do you avoid difficult conversations? Do you feel satisfied with your connections, with the quality of them? Do you feel alone and misunderstood? Ever? Why? Or why not? What part do you play in it? Until next time, you guys.
Thanks for listening to the School of Connection podcast. Be sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes, and visit schoolofconnection.com/podcast for the show notes.